Pest infestation? Call Bugman, because when you see red, bugs are dead.
All right, it's Tuesday, the 16th of September, and we had a press conference today with Virginia Tech. We'll go over that. We'll go over some. Unfortunately, this is probably going to be more of a Virginia Tech show than anything, but there's a lot of Virginia Tech fans out there wondering what's going on. So I thought this might be something to try to help them to try to educate in certain areas that they may or may not know about. So, with that said, everybody knows that on Sunday, Virginia Tech made the decision to fire Brent Pry. They did not fire the athletic director, Whit Babcock, which to me is a little mind-boggling. You've had two horrible hires at the biggest job you have on campus. They've both failed miserably, and you keep him. I think the reason that they kept him is, and this may play out at the end of the year, I don't have any inside information on it. This is just an opinion. I'm just throwing this out there. But maybe at the end of this year, he's going to step down. And the reason I say that is because first of all, they need somebody. Let's go back in time about a month and 2 months ago. He had a big meeting with the Board of Visitors talking about how far Virginia Tech was behind in the ACC. Basically saying Virginia Tech was at $140 million and they needed to be at $200 million to be competitive with the rest of the ACC. Now, you know, the first question I have on that is, why is it 2025 and we're just now fourth game of 2025 and we just figured out that we didn't have enough money, or we didn't start changing when the tide started changing 3 years ago? Which again, I think goes back to my point, why is Whit Babcock still around? I think he's personally still around because he knows the numbers inside and out. He's done this presentation. They know they need him to get through this, to help them with other things and other financial situations that are going to be involved with this. I would not be surprised at the end of the year, at the beginning of next year, that Whit Babcock retires or goes into some other area at Virginia Tech. That's just my opinion. Again, no inside information. But what we know is, so they fired Brent Pry. So what does that mean? Let's not even talk about the coaches quite yet. Let's talk about the players. So on Sunday, the minute that they announced that opened the portal, a 30-day special portal for all the kids at Virginia Tech. They now can go in the portal and leave the program. They don't have to go now. They can wait till 28 days, 29 days, which I suspect will happen. This is what I believe will happen. There's going to be kids, like I know the one kid left already. Today is Tuesday. You have until Friday, if you're a player and you've played in the first 3 games, to decide if you're going to play the rest of the year. If you decide to play, then you burn that year of eligibility. So if you decide not to play, so the Lovett kid said, nope, I'm going to the portal, I'm going to sit out. Well, what that means is he now goes to his next destination at the same year that he's at right now at Virginia Tech. So he does not lose that. He does not lose that playing year. So he can transfer, maybe get more money, still have 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. If they do it by Saturday, if they decide to sit out by Saturday, now if they play Saturday, that's it. They've used that eligibility. But that's the first hurdle you got to get over. The second hurdle is you still have 20 whatever days, 24 days, 3 days left in that portal. So what that means is those kids can play the next, 3 or 4 games all the way up to Georgia Tech. And then decide to go in the portal. So they could go play the next 3 games and see how the outcome's going to be and see what all's going on, and then hop in the portal. So there's a catch-22. The kids that don't play on Saturday are gone. The kids that play on Saturday aren't necessarily gone, but you still have 23 more days to ride that out, that they're going to hop in the portal. So they can get in, play, put film together for themselves and show somebody else 3 or 4 games, and then they're out. So that's the thing with the players that maybe somebody doesn't understand. Today there was a press conference, so they've made Montgomery the interim coach. I think that's a good decision. I know there's people out there that want probably put JT Price back in that spot, but Philip Montgomery was the head coach for 5 years at Tulsa. No, he wasn't great. If you listened to my rant a couple weeks ago, he wasn't great, but he was a head coach, so he knows how to run the program. He knows how to run a program. Question would be, is he still going to call offense? Is he giving that up just to be the interim? There's a lot of things we don't know there. But in that press conference today, basically what was said is Whit Babcock will just be an assistant to hiring this football coach. So what does that mean? The reason they're keeping him on is he needs to be able to talk to the agents of these coaches. He needs to be able to talk the financials with these coaches. You can't just fire him out of the box and then have some guy on the board of visitors. So that's another reason I think they've kept him around. Secondly, they basically said the board of visitors in a committee will have the final say on who the coach is. And, there's good and there's bad to that. So the bad is, let's start with the good. The good is you now have more people that are going to be held accountable, right? But you also are going to there's going to be a power struggle within that committee. There's just no doubt about it. It doesn't matter how many people you get together. There's always going to be an alpha in a room. And how much does that person have in terms of persuasion over the others? That's the question I would have. Secondly, these people that are on this committee, do they know football, or are they just meeting somebody, interviewing them, and going, oh, that's a good guy? That would be my second question. That's where I think also it could be a little bit of a bad situation. If this comes to fruition, whoever they hire, and that doesn't work, well, this doesn't fall on Whit Babcock. This falls on that committee, in my opinion. So, to me, you've got bigger heads that need to be gone if that happens. Another thing that scares me is they said that they're going to put together a presentation to the Board of Visitors to get more money, and that's going to happen at the end of September. That tells me they're going pretty slow. And I get it, because they don't know what kind of numbers they have, but now you're going out looking for a football coach, and you don't have numbers, you don't have this, you don't have that. So, I'm sure that there's some talking going on behind closed doors with people and agents. I'm sure somebody says, hey, I would be interested in that job, agent, call and find out. And then they're going to say, well, what's your number? But they don't even know the operating budget going forward until 2 weeks from today, when they have that committee. In that interview today, it sounded like they are going to basically hire a general manager, which most people have done last year before last. You're just way behind. It's 2025, and it's almost like you just realized, oh, well, we need to do what everybody else is doing. Either that, or the Board of Visitors wasn't giving up money, even though he was, raising his hand saying we need more money. that would be another question for that board, and that committee, and that board of visitors. How dedicated have you been? Is it partly your fault? This is not a blame game at this point, because you're looking for the future. But those are just some things I would think about if you were asking the committee a question. I do think you'll come back, and I think that the $200 million will come into play. I think they will say, "Hey, we're going to give you the $200 million." My question is, what happens when that bar rises to 230 in a year or so? Is Virginia Tech going to move that bar? That would be another question, I have for the committee. So there's a lot of questions. There's still a lot of unknowns. The players, to me, that's a big deal, because if they do not play in Saturday's game, that means they have their eligibility for next year. If they do decide to play, and you might have some that say, "Hey, look, man, I'm a sophomore, or I'm a freshman, I'm going to play, and we're going to play these next 4 or 5 games out, and then we'll see." They still have 30 days to hop in that portal after 30 days from Sunday. So that's the first hurdle, is Saturday, who plays, who doesn't. And then, 30 days down the road, who decides to hop in the portal. Like if you go out and you lose the next 3, 4, 5 games, those kids are probably hopping in the portal. Just to be honest. So whoever takes the job, the next job is going to be way, way behind the 8 ball, because all the kids have left, and you're starting from scratch. This is probably not going to be popular, what I'm about to say, but I think it needs to be said. If I'm the coach coming in, or I'm the GM coming in, quite frankly, I don't even want this person on my committee for coaching. Maybe you can ask him questions outside of the committee, but I would say this. Look, Frank Beamer is a legend at Virginia Tech. Frank Beamer built Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech owes Frank Beamer for where they were when he left. But guess what? It's time to stop the Frank Beamer stuff. You don't want his input. We're not talking about Frank Beamer. Look, Frank Beamer's not coming through the door anymore. We appreciate everything he's done for the program. It's now time to find another Frank Beamer. We need to find somebody that's going to be here long term, that we support, that wins. And you can't always say, "Well, Frank Beamer, Frank Beamer, Frank Beamer." Hey, look, it's time. I hate to say that. That sounds a little bit cold. And people will be like, "I would never turn my back on Frank Beamer." It's not turning your back. It's turning the page. It's looking forward. So, if I'm the next coach, I get up on the mic after you interviewed me, or hired me, I should say, and I say, "Listen, Frank Beamer's not coming through that door. He's welcome anytime. He can have a desk in my office." And I would love to listen to him. I would, if I'm a coach. But here's the deal. We're moving on from Frank Beamer. We're moving on from Michael Vick. We're moving on. That's not saying that they're not welcome. That's not saying that but we can't keep living in the past of what we did, trying to get to the future, if all we're talking about is Michael Vick and Frank Beamer. Look, I know that sounds harsh. I know some people are going to not like it and say, "Frank Beamer," I get it. You're moving forward. Look, Georgia had Jim Donnan. Then they had Mark Richt. Then they brought in who? Kirby Smart. Guess who they're not talking about any longer? Donnan, Dooley. They're not talking about those coaches anymore because they've moved on. And I think that's something that the DNA of Virginia Tech fans and Virginia Tech in those buildings need to understand. It's time to move on from Frank Beamer. Hey, we got a statue out there. The man is a legend. I'm not disputing that at all. But we got to get away. We got to do our own things now. So that's my take on the whole situation there. I've heard heard and seen all kinds of, especially the fans. They're giving names, and the media's giving names, and let's just be honest. I don't think Virginia Tech is going to be set up financially to go steal some of these coaches. Like, for example, Dan Mullen. I keep hearing Dan Mullen's name thrown around. Well, you got to pay Price $6 million. Dan Mullen has a $7 million buyout. So you're telling me they're going to pay more for that guy's buyout to bring him here just to pay him more money. So that's $6 million for Pry, $7 million for his buyout, and then you got to turn around and give him $6, $7, $8 million at Virginia Tech. Not happening. Sorry, it's not happening. You don't have the money. So for all these people going, we need to call Shane Beamer, we need to do this. Listen, if you want Shane Beamer, you can have Shane Beamer. This is just my honest opinion. I do think he has a little bit of a grudge on his shoulder by the way that his father was pushed out. And so he may not want to come back. We're talking about Frank Beamer. If you remember, they said to Frank Beamer, this is your last year. You're not coming back next year. That was not his decision. So I still think there's a little animosity there, or a grudge, if you will, on Shane Beamer. Now, if he goes out this year and he's got a tough schedule, and the next 3 or 4 games and he gets beat, and then maybe you might start thinking about it. But I'm telling you this, you're going to have to back up the Brinks truck to get him. You're going to have to say, we're going to give you a Jimbo Fisher type deal that he had at A&M, $10, $12 million a year. We're going to give you X amount, $20 million for NIL. Something I don't think everybody also realizes, I'm going to jump on you here, is the NIL money. So up until this point, we've only been paying football, basketball, and baseball players. Well, guess who gets in on the mix this year? Softball. So we've heard Virginia Tech's baseball's good and their softball's good. Well, guess what? Now you got to start paying for the softball girls. So when he's talking about budgets, he's not just talking about just for the football. So, but I will say this, people aren't going to like this. Football pays the bills. Softball and baseball don't pay the bills. So you're going to have to decide, what do you want to be good in? Do you want to be good in basketball, baseball, and softball? Okay, then football's taking a hit. If you want to be good in football, sorry, softball and baseball, we're probably not going to be the best. That's just a trick. If you go through all of college football, baseball, basketball right now, everybody's not good in everything. If you're very good in football, you're not necessarily very good in softball and baseball or basketball. So you got to choose. Okay, and enough about that. So I think there's no way Mullen's coming. Shane Beamer, I think that would be the first hire. That would be the first call and say, hey, listen, we want you here. We're willing to give you, a big number. Send us a number. Have on your board $10 million because that's what it's going to take. Hey, maybe it's a 10-year contract and can't fire him for the first 6 years. Something to that effect. It's going to be, you'll have to back a Brinks truck up, is what I'm saying. So I think your wheelhouse is going to be some of these lower tiered head coaches. We'll touch on this in a minute, or some of the people that aren't coaching right now. The Gulch guy out of South Florida, I think that would be a good hire. The offensive coordinator out of Oregon, I think that would be a good hire. The Summerall guy from Tulane, that would be a good hire. The problem that you're going to have is some of these other schools are going to start opening up too. Right now you have pick of the litter other than UCLA. So you have a little bit of advantage, but it's going to be hard going to somebody and saying, hey, we would like you to be our coach in 2026 that's coaching right now, because that coach is going to say, hey, look, man, I'm on week 3 here. Look, I know y'all did horrible, but we're over here winning right now. Like, I can't I can't just hop off the bus in week 3 or 4 just because your season's down the drain. That's going to be interesting. That whole dynamic is going to be interesting how it plays out. So I don't know. These names you keep hearing bannered about, just keep in mind, you've got to pay Brent Pry almost $7 million. You've got to buy out whoever is coaching somewhere. Then you have to turn around and give them a salary for the year. And now you've got to pay a GM. So just think, there's a lot of money that's going to come into this. So that's why I think going after these big names doesn't make a lot of sense for Virginia Tech long term. Because you ultimately want the money to pay the players. You don't want the money to pay the coaches. No, I get it. The big time coaches get big time money. I get it. But maybe that's not where you are right now. Use the money on the players and let a coach that's pretty daggone good do his job. I mean, I think that's where I would lean. I've seen people putting on their Jimbo Fisher. Hey, listen, you could get Jimbo Fisher probably, but let's be honest. Jimbo Fisher won a national championship. He had a really good quarterback in Jameis Winston. The next year at Florida State, didn't do so good. Second year, he walked on his team middle of the year. Went to Texas A&M, had all the money in the world. In fact, he had the number 1 recruiting class ever, of any year ever. Not just last year, this year, the top recruiting class ever based on the rankings of the players. And guess what? He had 1 year that he won more than 8 games. I'm a fan. I would tell you, don't do it. You might be able to get him for cheap. And yes, he can recruit, but he could also recruit because he had a lot of money at Texas A&M. So I would say no, don't do the Jimbo Fisher thing. Stay out of the Ed Orgeron thing. I don't know. There's some names out there that I keep hearing people talk about, and I'm just like, no, stay away. Go get a guy that is a good head coach. The kids like him. He runs a good program. He runs a good offense or defense or whatever. And use the money on the kids, at least for the first 4, 5, 6 years. Now, I know people want immediate. They're going to get somebody and they think it's going to be immediate. Listen, I'm telling you. I'm just going to tell you now, this is a 2, 3 year, 4 year deal for you to build back. You haven't had the money. You aren't winning. It's not a destination. Blacksburg's not a destination. You've got to get a GM in there now that hasn't been a GM. You've got a committee that's kind of involved. Like, is the head coach still reporting to the athletic director or this committee now? There's a lot of things that are going on. I would just say Virginia Tech, don't overpay for the coach, overpay for the player at this point, and get a coach that, there's the UTSA, the trailer guy, UTSA, nobody's talked about him. He is an excellent coach. There was some big-time programs that looked at him in the last couple of years. You might get a Mark Stoops that gets fired at Kentucky. Yeah, maybe that's a good hire for Virginia Tech. I think you need somebody that's fiery, that has proven that he can do what he did. I don't think you want necessarily an offensive coordinator. I think you want somebody with experience, but I just don't think you want to overpay at this point. Like, if you're down at this point, like, let's just give it another year or two and get it right instead of hopping into just some big name to make a splash hire. Splash hires rarely work. Rarely work unless you're at the top end of the spectrum, right? LSU or somewhere like that. So I would just say that to the Tech faithful out there, like, don't get involved necessarily with the big name. If you get somebody that you want, great. If you get Shane Beamer, I think to me, I've heard Saban. I've heard, come on, guys. You're not getting, Saban's not coming back to restart a program. He's not doing it. Okay? And I've seen people say, Make him tell us no. No. I'll tell you for him. No. Some of the guys that are some of the names are being put out there. No. They're not coming. Okay? So this is why I think you need to focus on guys that have been doing good. Maybe, at a Tulane or maybe at a South Florida or maybe somewhere like that. Kids want to play for a coach that's successful, that's personable, and that's got a little bit of a fire, behind him. And I would just say it's going to take a couple years for Virginia Tech. It's going to take a couple years, and we'll see. I mean, I hope it works out well for football. College football is better when Virginia Tech is good. I mean, it just is. I'm not a fan. I'm saying that truthfully. But it's also unbearable sometimes when you're good because of the fans. But I'm also being truthful there. But anyway, I would just say, hey, take a deep breath. The first hurdle is what happens with the kids this week, and then in the next 30 days with the portal. Because what's going to happen? What if you end up with a mass exodus? You're going to have 60, 70 kids that you got to replace with a new coach, a new offense coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. And then secondly, there's not a lot of people that are leaving to be a head coach right now. Maybe you go to the pros. Maybe you go. Maybe you get Cliff Kingsbury. He's an offensive coach, and he was a head coach at Cardinals. He's an offensive-minded coach. Something I did hear today, Jeff King from Pulaski was a tight end. He is a senior personnel with a team in the NFL. Maybe that's your GM. Maybe you go get that guy. But a part of me also says you don't want a Virginia Tech guy at this point. Like, you want the right guy. And we'll see. We'll see what happens in the coming days and weeks. But I don't necessarily know you want a Virginia Tech guy. I think you want the right guy. And that might not be a Virginia Tech guy. So, with that said, we'll catch up with you later in the week. Have a good week. Heathens, Kettle Corn, and Mobile Grill. You can find them at Dr. Pepper Park, local Roanoke events, and also now doing fundraising with teams, organizations, churches, etc. Find them on Facebook, Heathens, Kettle Corn, and Mobile Grill.